Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice little 13-game Major League Baseball slate. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Let's check the weather for this slate real quick here. So it doesn't look like we have any weather concerns on the slate, so that's nice. It's a pretty big slate, though, so keep that in mind. I tend to play light on these giant slates because it's pretty hard to make real quality lineups. I'm also going to mention that on this slate, we don't have a ton of teams that look all that great. It seems like it's probably going to be a weaker slate from that perspective. I do think there's a few teams that are going to definitely be gangbusters, like Kansas City, San Francisco, the Dodgers, Toronto, Houston, but there's a lot of teams that seem to be a little bit underwhelming today. Uh, so let's go ahead and get into the slate here. So let's look at our pitchers first, excuse me. So we do have a few good pitchers today. We have a lot of pitchers that kind of have a lot of high risk, high reward situation, but Cole Reagans definitely looks like the best option on the slate. He's got a good strikeout rate, and he's got a good matchup against the Angels. I do think, even that, I do think a couple of Angels players have some potential today, so he's not a must play, but he's definitely up there, very close. He also has had one bad game against Angels this season already, but I do think he has a good game today. I think he's probably the best option on the slate. Another GPP play would be Robbie Ray for the Giants. Now he's a little bit cheaper, and he's been pretty good lately. He's had some ups and downs. He's got a very favorable matchup here against the White Sox, and he's got some potential, even though he's only a few games into the season so far since he's been back from injury. So I do think he looks favorable today, though, even though he's been a little bit inconsistent so far this way. The strikeout rate is a little bit of a concern, but he's improving, so I think he'd be fine. Another guy I would look at is Zach Wheeler for Philly. Now, he does have a tougher matchup against Atlanta, and I do think this game actually has some potential to be a high-scoring affair. But he is a pretty good pitcher, and he scored 20 fantasy points against Atlanta last time he played them, and he had 5 strikeouts in that game, which is a little bit under what I would like, but he definitely has that potential today. Ober for Minnesota also has a very interesting matchup here against San Diego. Not a team he's played, but he has been really good lately. He's got a high ceiling, and he's got a relatively decent floor, so I think he's somebody you have to consider on the slate in a favorable matchup. Those are pretty much my GPP plays. I do have a bunch of Boomer Bust plays. Now, a Boomer Bust play for me is a player that can definitely do well in the particular situation, but he definitely doesn't look all that great on this particular day. One of those would be Gill for the Yankees against Cleveland. Another would be Lopez for Atlanta against Philadelphia. Also, Miller for the Dodgers for Seattle against the Dodgers. Bradford for Texas against Pittsburgh. Barrios for Toronto. Pivetta for Boston, Keller for Pittsburgh, and Baz for Tampa Bay. Lots of guys kind of in that situation. And then I do have some Boomer Bust plays. Sorry, I do have a couple Hail Mary plays at the bottom here. Mr. Perez for San Diego, though I do think that Royce Lewis has a lot of potential today. And then Spears for Cincinnati against Toronto, and Joey Estes for Oakland against Tampa Bay. So with that said, guys, let's get into our bats today. So when we look at our catchers on this slate, fairly interesting that we do have Salvador Perez as a top tier option. He was pretty decent yesterday. He scored 14 fantasy points. He did pretty well. Didn't hit a home run, but he definitely got a couple of hits. And he looks really solid today again. Now his price is high, and I don't really love him, but I do think he's a really good play, and he's got good home run metrics as well today. But a little bit cheaper plays, Ryan Jeffers looks solid today. Now he's definitely going to be up there in the ownership on this slate. So, and he's priced nice and fair for Minnesota. I think he's in a pretty decent matchup, and he definitely has some potential to have a solid game here, especially with his home run potential. Cal Raleigh for Seattle has been pretty solid lately with the home runs, and he continues to have a home run upside on this particular slate, though. I definitely think Jeffers is safer for just pure hitting, but I do think Cal Raleigh has just as much home run upside. Yanir Diaz, also for Houston, he was a really solid play yesterday, and he turns into another good play again. He's had 2 straight games with a home run, and he has that good home run metric again today. And then a very cheap kind of a Hail Mary play for this position will be Yasmani Grandal for Pittsburgh. He definitely has some potential on this one. He hasn't done much at times this season, but he definitely has some potential for a home run on this particular slate. Looking at the ownership here, Freddie Fermin, Cal Raleigh, and Ryan Jeffers, and then low-owned upside guy, JT Realmuto. Looking at first base, we do like Ohtani a lot. This position is pretty deep. Or sorry, this position, yeah, it's pretty deep as the top options. We have Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, Bryce Harper, and Matt Olson, all being pretty expensive, but also having a lot of home run potential on this one. Though Freddie Freeman doesn't have the home run upside that Ohtani and Bryce Harper or Matt Olson do. But a value play here would be Nate Lowe. I think he's probably my favorite value on this slate at this position, as he's got some really good hitting metrics for this game and definitely has some potential to be a safe, cheap play. Looking at the ownership here, it will be Brendan Lowe, Ohtani, and Bryce Harper, and then the low-owned upside guys will be Jose Miranda, Vlad Jr., and Tristan Casas. Looking at second base, we do like Jose Altuve and Marcus Semien a lot as expensive options, but we have a bunch of value plays on this position that you can kind of mix and match, and a couple of them also can fit at other positions. One being, um, excuse me, Miguel Garcia for Kansas City. He can also play at third base, and he definitely fits better at third base with all the good value options at this position. He's pretty priced fairly here, and he's got good hitting metrics today. Not a huge home run threat, though. Then we'll look at Tommy Edman. How much? Let's see. Sorry, $3,500 for the Dodgers. He might end up being at the back of the lineup. He played his first game last uh, uh, last game, and he got a stolen base too, so he's definitely capable of a solid option here. He has been hurt for the whole season, but he did get traded, so he should be a pretty interesting play on the slate if he continues to start for the Dodgers. Gleyber Torres is a little bit more expensive, but he definitely has some potential for the Yankees with good hitting metrics on this particular slate, and I do like his upside here. And then Will Wagner is just a nice cheap value play at $2,500. He's started his season pretty solid. He's played 6 games so far. He does not need to score a ton of fantasy points at this really reduced price point, so I do think he's somebody you got to consider on the slate. The top ownership here will be Gleyber Torres, Brandon Lowe, Miguel Garcia, Marcus Semien, Brendan Donovan, and Jose Altuve, with Austin Martin and Bryson Stott being kind of low-owned upside guys. Third base today, we do like Rafael Devers. He's very expensive, so do keep that in mind. But he is got really good home run metrics today. I think he is somebody I'd definitely look at as a considerable option. Miguel Garcia, I already mentioned, can play here as well. And then Max Muncy, he really does give me a lot of home run potential on the slate, and so I think he's somebody I have to consider on this one. He doesn't always have that good home run metric, but today he does, and he's hitting pretty well the last few games, getting some hits in certain situations at least. So I think he's definitely high risk, high reward, but especially with the price point. As for the ownership here, Caballero and then Miguel Garcia will be the top owned, with Royce Lewis, Jose Miranda, Dylan Moore, and Alec Boone being kind of the contrarian plays at this position. Looking at shortstop, Corey Seager is a core play for me, and he is $5,300. I think he's the safest bet for a home run on the slate, and he looks really solid. He had 2 home runs yesterday too. He's been hitting the ball fairly well lately, and he's definitely got some really good potential on this one. I also like Bobby Witt Jr. and Ella De La Cruz here, but if you want to go for a cheaper play, Anthony Volpe uh, and Jose Caballero are the top 2 value options at this position. Volpe has been solid at times this season. Even though he has struggled a little bit lately, he does have good hitting metrics today. And then, of course, Caballero, he looks like a solid contrarian play on the slate, as he's been having some games that are good, and he can get some stolen bases as well, which he actually looks really good for that on this particular slate. The ownership at this position: Jose Caballero, Tyler Fitzgerald, Corey Seager, Bobby Witt, and Kyle Farmer, with Trey Turner, Ella De La Cruz, Dylan Moore, and Willie Castro being the low-owned upside guys. Looking at outfielders, we do like Ohtani, Jordan Alvarez, and Aaron Judge, and Jarren Duran as to be expensive plays with a lot of home run potential. I really like Jordan Alvarez and Ohtani for home runs today. For some other closer to value options, Luis Robert. Um, Now he's been somebody that's very hard to roster because he's on the White Sox, but he's looked really good the last week or so, and he has had some monster games fantasy wise, so he's definitely worth a look here, though he is extremely high risk, high reward. Julio Rodriguez, a little bit pricier than I'd like for a kind of a mid-priced option, but he has really good metrics today, so he's definitely somebody you have to look at and consider. Same with Adolis Garcia. He's a little bit cheaper though, and I do like his home run potential today. He's been a little bit inconsistent, but he's got kind of a boomer bust quality for a batter right now. And then Wilyer Abreu, he's been phenomenal at times for us in fantasy, and he looks really solid again today. So he's definitely somebody I would consider, and a positive matchup there for Boston. Some contrarian plays at this position: Grant McCray for San Francisco, Darian Blanco for Kansas City. I really like Blanco; he's been hitting the ball very well lately. Connor Joe and Michael Harris, also Jake Fraley, Leody Taveras, and Josh Lowe. The top ownership at this position will be Austin Slater, Josh Lowe, Manuel Margot, Dalton Varsho, Eloy Jimenez, Brendan Donovan, and Otani. Some Hail Mary punts at this position: T.J. Friedel, uh, Giancarlo Stanton, Masataka Yoshida, and Dalton Varsho. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, comment, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below.